Sometimes it's hard for me to imagine that anything that comes from me could possibly be a sweet sound in your ear. And yet, um, when I hear the voices of the people that I love, when I see my children and hear the things that they have to say and the laughter and the joy around me, even in the midst of pain, God, it makes it a little easier for me to understand that you are so pleased with us, that you love us so much that any noise we make is a sweet sound to you because we are yours. You are infinitely patient, and your love is unfailing. And we just can't thank you enough for that, God. Amen. Why don't you say hi to somebody before you have a seat? Sorry. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Last night, Jennifer and I went over to the Flying M coffee shop, and we were listening to some writings and just stories from specifically from refugees who have come here and have become kind of part of America over time. And we were listening to this great guy from he grew up in Congo, and he was talking about how in Congo everyone is introducing themselves and talking to each other all the time. Like you get up in the morning and you go check on your neighbor and find out how they're doing, and then you go to work, and then you come back and ask them how their day was, and then you go about your business. And he described like getting on a bus for the first time, and everyone's just sort of like reading their paper, and how weird that was, or how weird people thought he was, and his brothers like shaking hands and introducing to everyone. Uh, and besides feeling a little bit guilty that I'd just come into the coffee shop and sat down without like greeting anyone, there was something that I thought of that was really interesting, and that is that I love in our community how there actually is an amazing level of friendliness and kindness. And some people say it's an Idaho thing. I don't know because I haven't been around that long, but I definitely see it around us, and I think that's such a wonderful thing. I think I was just thinking of Wayne, of you, the Shaddocks that just moved here. You guys can wave hi. We go back almost 2 churches, like in 2 decades, basically. But the Shaddocks just moved here this week, and I was helping Wayne move a couple things, and he was telling me how like 3 neighbors who you never met like came back and helped them like unload the truck and stuff. What an amazing thing. So that's what I love about when we get up and say hi to each other and stuff before. I think God just kicked in right there. That was the Holy Spirit. Excellent. There we go. Whew. Okay, now we've got off the chip train. God's moving. Hey, in your program, just let me draw attention to a few things. First off is our VHS, Vision, Huddle, and Skills, VHS. If you are involved in any capacity in our church in leadership, if you are a part of the children's ministry or the coffee team, a greeter, a teller, we want you to show up with us on November 5th. I want to make sure I get the date right. November 5th, a couple of weeks on a Sunday. We're going to meet here at 6 o'clock in the evening. We're going to be in the fellowship area right there, and we want to feed you. We want all of us to get together so that across ministry areas, we can talk about what God is doing at our church, and so that we can talk about how does it affect us that there are people here every morning to make coffee, and what does it mean to the life and vision of our church that there's a children's ministry that goes on here, and the way we take care of kids, all those things. come together. So as we talk about vision, get together in our ministry groups and eat. I want to encourage you to show up for that. One thing that would be really helpful to us is if you just wrote that on your white card, and you can put that in the offering boxes on the way out. Just say, I'm planning on being at VHS. That would really help us in terms of getting food. And I'll just give you a little preview. We're hooking up with my friend Jose and Jose Manuel, and he has a Mexican Euro food truck and restaurant. And so he's going to come and we're going to have like gyros on one side. Some of you, it's gyro. Now you know what I'm talking about? We're going to have gyros on one side and we're going to have taco bar on the other side. And if you're anything like Chip, you can like kind of scoop from both sides and have this amazing like fatty taco. Anyways, that's going on. We're going to feed you guys. I'm excited about that. On October 15th, at 6:30 here in the Commons room. We had Jada up here last week just talking about one of those groups of people that we just don't know how to handle sometimes, and so we end up ignoring them, and that is parents who have lost children, especially infants. And so on October 15th at 6:30, they're going to meet in here, and everyone is welcome. I would just encourage you, if you've never been through something like this, I want to especially encourage you to show up for these guys. They need people around them to acknowledge them and to support them. And so they're going to eat, and it's actually a national observance of this. And so there's kind of a candle lighting thing that they do that's assured and comforted and feel safe, which is something a sheep has to have to survive. The idea that God is walking beside us as the shepherd walks along with his sheep, that there's a rod to protect us, a staff to guide us along, that we can live in every way like a sheep does, being completely helpless and incapable of doing everything on our own, and know that there's a shepherd that has laid that out for us and guards us in the process. I mean, what an amazing concept. And he's kind of taken a turn here, and we've moved a little bit away from the sheep metaphor, and we've been talking the last few weeks of this table that God prepares for us. I said it that time, but not while we were reading. He sets this table for us, and in the presence of our enemies, the God of the universe making for us a feast where he serves us to prepare it, and he sits with us as unworthy as we are to be in his presence. And then all the people around us that know just as well as we do about our unworthiness to be there are just looking on in horror as God loves on us and loves us so deeply. There's some powerful stuff here. Now maybe it makes sense why people keep quoting this over and over again. So today, David finishes the thought of this table of being anointed with oil, and he just says, my cup overflows. Have you had one of those moments? Hope you've had more than one of those moments. I'll never forget a stint in my life that now seems so far away when I first got married, and Jennifer and I lived in this disgusting Victorian home that was infested with mosquitoes, and it had been divided into apartments. But we paid the premium for it because it was 3 blocks to the beach in Santa Cruz on the Monterey Bay, and I worked on the wharf, renting fishing boats, and then the other way I worked downtown at a surf shop, and my transportation was a skateboard, and it was a great time of life. Surfing was everything, and I got involved with this group of people, and we got to travel to contests all the way down the coast, and my favorite trip that we ever took was where we went down near Santa Barbara, and of course that involves one guy going and renting a hotel room for one person, and then like 30 little disgusting surf rats like sneaking in the back door. And so we're all like around the floor. And so we had a contest in Santa Barbara, and on the way back, we stopped at a place that even people that don't surf have often heard of, Rincon. You know, Rincon, oh man, it's got a reputation as being one of the best waves in the world, and it does not disappoint. It's hard to get in there because, of course, the little point has been bought out with all these like gajillion-dollar homes. But if you know the right person, or if you can kind of sneak in the right way, you can surf this break. And Rincon it's this amazing. I mean, Rincon actually means corner in Spanish, and so it's this little point that juts out, and the waves peel just right to the right, and it is the longest running wave that you'll ever ride. I mean, you drop in at the beginning, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes, and it's such a long ride that by the end you're just kind of standing there because you're exhausted, but you don't want to get off, and you can't stop smiling, and you're just standing there, and the guy behind you is trying to get you to go because he wants to now surf the wave. It is the most amazing experience, and just, you know, Southern California, sunshiny, and man, in a moment like that, I can easily understand David saying, my cup overflows. There's those moments that we have in life, and I always wish for more of them, but there's those moments where you're just sitting there and you are bursting. Maybe it was more noble than a surf session for you, and it was like the birth of a child or something, you know, something cliche like that. But man, to be sitting in a moment where you are fully present because you don't want this moment to pass. My cup overflows. David is describing the life of living under the Good Shepherd, and describes the luxury and the excess of God preparing a feast for him when he doesn't deserve it, of God anointing him to be at the table and to be a co-host at the table, giving him the authority to be a leader in this new kingdom that God is establishing. And all of a sudden, all David can say is, my cup overflows. It's important, I think, that we take a minute to think this through. to let this idea sink in, because so often we are just desperate for an answer. We're not satisfied with things that are going on. We're actively being hurt and beat down in the things we're experiencing in life. And we're just desperate for God to give us some message of hope or answer to what we're going through. And we tend to forget that our cup could be overflowing if we were looking at things right now. And I don't mean spinning stuff to make something bad and maybe try to imagine that it looks good. I'm talking about observing and understanding the things that God is doing, where if we took a moment and sat there with it, we would understand this concept of our cup overflowing. There's another thing that really stood out to me last night as I was listening to people talk about the refugee experience. When they talked about someone who has experienced such intense horror in their lives, when they finally get to come to a place where they can rest and where they're not in immediate danger of their family being torn apart or all of the horrible things that they came from, it's difficult for them to embrace the peace of it all. In fact, what one lady was saying is that a refugee in our country, what they need more than anything is someone to befriend them and to let them experience the joy and the beauty of being in a place where nobody's going to come through and just destroy your house and your family tonight or tomorrow. They just need people to stand next to them and help them enjoy the moment. This is what David's talking about when he gets to this place and he says, you know what? My cup overflows. When I really think about this and I get past being bummed that I'm comparing myself to a sheep and how helpless and lost that can seem sometimes, when I really walk through what it means to live underneath the Good Shepherd, it's a beautiful thing. My cup overflows. And he says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. I think sometimes we interpret this idea of goodness and mercy will follow me all of the days of my life the way we do everything else. We read, goodness and mercy will follow me. And immediately my mind goes to happiness and pain-free living. Are you some of you are really tracking with me. You're like, oh, yeah. I hear goodness and mercy follow me all the days of my life. And I think, yes, sweet. I got this God with a rod to protect me and a staff to guide me to ultimate happiness and fulfillment. Pain-free. Now I've got a God who's going to help me avoid all these painful things that I hate so much. He's going to help me avoid these painful things that I keep revisiting over and over and over, it seems, in my life. But I think this psalm we have to be careful with, as we've talked about already, because it's really an illustration of the Good Shepherd and his unfailing love and care for your soul. The shepherd guides and protects our souls so that who we really are can flourish, so that who we really are can be healed and transformed in the face of any circumstances. It's not a shallow promise to keep you comfortable, to keep bad things from happening to you, because your heart is infinitely more important than any other thing. This is a big one that we've got to really get down in our head and really wrap our minds around, and that we talked about with this whole conversation about rods and staff. The protection of the shepherd, the competent protection of the shepherd is a promise to protect your soul at all costs. The rod is a promise to gently guide your soul along as you submit to the shepherd and as he shapes and transforms you in your life. The rod and the staff are not a promise to protect you from bad things happening in your life. They're not a promise to stop horrible things from going on, to stop you from doing horrible things. The staff is not to smack you on the side of the head and discipline you and teach you a lesson every time you go on the wrong path. The rod and the staff of the shepherd are to guide and protect your soul, because who you are at a core level is so much more important than anything else. Who you are on a core level, to be cared for and nurtured in the soul, is to give you the opportunity to be who you are and show up under any circumstance. The cup overflows. The cup seems empty. Somebody stepped on my cup like it was a Greek wedding. that Greek wedding? I think that's Jewish. I can't remember. Oh, Greek, you break the plates. Sorry, weddings got confused. You get what I'm driving at here? We have to be so careful that we don't read a psalm like this of David, such a beautiful and image-packed piece of writing, and that we don't automatically put on God this idea of, okay, so as long as I let myself be a sheep, you have to do this, this, and this. It's not an exchange in that way. It's not a promise to just keep bad things from happening, but it's about guarding my soul. And in that sense, the rod and the staff of the shepherd, they comfort me. David talks about God's nurturing and transforming of his soul in the face of whatever this broken world can throw at him. And this is an important thing for us to get, because that part of you that makes jokes in serious moments to avoid real emotion, that part of you that makes sure you're always needed but never show any need, the way that you can be the guy or the girl that helps everyone do whatever they need and yet would rather die than ask for help yourself. Your sin-managing false self will never find comfort in the Good Shepherd. That thing that we drape over our souls that is meant to get the attention and love of the people in the world around us, that's made to make us worthy of the love of the people around us and hopefully earn God's love, that false self that we just hang over our true selves, that we think is going to make us palatable to the people around us, will never find comfort in the Good Shepherd. The feast won't make sense. Being in the presence of my enemies, I don't even understand what that means. Being anointed with oil, none of that makes sense if I'm thinking that God is going to somehow protect and care for this outer shell that I've created, thinking I'm not good enough on the inside. Your soul is so important and neglected. We did a huge series on tending to our souls. And if you missed any part of that, I say go back and listen to it. It was one of the most transformative teachings in the life of this church, probably. God's promise as the Good Shepherd is to care for our soul, to protect it, to guide it, to serve us at a soul level. And our sin management just gets in the way of it. Our soul finds healing and comfort as the Good Shepherd guides us to the truth and reveals who we were made to be. Can you remember a time where you have been on purpose, sort of allowed yourself to be stripped away of everything except who you are? I mean, we've had situations like that in crisis, right? I mean, when the world literally falls apart around you, you are pared down to nothing. And a lot of us have had that situation. And I hope that at some point you have the opportunity to put yourself there on purpose, because that's a whole nother experience. But either way, I hope you can think this through for a moment. Think about that time. I know that there are so many of us that are in the middle of it right now, where everything has just been pulled away. The carpet's been pulled out from under you, and you have this sense that you were just free falling. Just take a second, though, and if you can remove the pain and the horror of it all and think about this for a second, that there you are, which can be the most comforting and disconcerting thing in the universe, right? It's disconcerting because I'm not sure I'm good enough at that level. I had the house, I had the marriage, I had the car, I had my job, I had all those things that kind of gave me identity and substance. And when those are all taken away, I'm pretty sure that there's not anything worthwhile left. Which takes us all the way back to a conversation about a feast that God prepares for you in the presence of everyone who knows you're not worthy. When I say I don't feel worthy of God's feast, I don't mean that in sort of a self-effacing, don't stop. No, don't stop. Don't stop saying those good things about me. That's not a sort of a false a facing thing. I mean, literally at my core, I wonder if I'm good enough. The house is gone. The friends are gone. The job is gone. The most beautiful place in the southwest corner of Colorado is gone. And who am I now? And is that going to be enough? God prepares a feast for us. He declares that we are saints who sin, not sinners desperately trying to become saints. God proves to us that he loves us more than he hates sin. David's response to that, my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. So goodness and mercy. We got to be careful with those too, don't we? Goodness, Tob, I'm not going to pronounce any of these right, but what do we know? Tob, goodness. The word that David uses in Psalm 23, it's about everything that is pleasant and beautiful, kind, right, and good. I guess we can kind of grasp that. Goodness will follow me all of my days. Anything that is beautiful and kind, right, and good, pleasant. Immediately when I read this, I think of a verse in Philippians chapter 4. I can't remember if I put up there or not. Paul says, finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable. Some of you already know where I'm going with this. We've heard this before. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable. If there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, what does he say? Think about these things. Man, I've heard that verse so many times, usually in sort of a discipleship context where I'm being taught what it looks like to follow Christ. And I think that is so good and valuable in terms of me trying to imagine, okay, what does it look like to be in communion with God? It looks like these things. The trouble that I have with that, and where I feel like we hit a crossroads with what David is saying here, is he says, goodness will follow me all of the days of my life. And I think of this verse here, and this describes goodness. Only David doesn't seem to be talking about goodness being the things that I do all of the days of my life. When I read this passage, I usually think, okay, those are the things I need to think about. I need to make sure I don't think about bad things, and I only think about these good things. This is my chore. This is my list of chores. Okay, is it true? And maybe it's my checklist for every situation of my life. Is this true? Is it honorable? Is this just? Is there any purity here? Whatever is pleasing, commendable. I'm not sure what commendable means. Is there excellent? You know, I go through all of this stuff, and I think this is my checklist. When I want to see if my life is measuring up to the standard of God's goodness that I want to be, sincerely, I can kind of walk through this and check it off the list. And if most of them fit, green light, right? David says, goodness follows me all of the days of my life. This follows me. This is no longer a list of things that I need to do, that I need to check to see if my life is measuring up to what it should be. This is David's description of what follows me all the days of my life under the guidance of the Good Shepherd. And then all of a sudden I noticed that Paul starts out with, finally, beloved. There it is again, that you are enough for God. You are his beloved. Long before you ever thought to grace him with your presence and belief. Long before you ever adopted a belief system that honors and respects the God of the Bible, you were his beloved. As his beloved, what will follow you all the days of your life is whatever is true, whatever is honorable and just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, commendable, excellent, worthy of praise. Think about these things because they are what the shepherd pursues you with for your life. It's not a directive of behavior from the perspective of Psalm 23, but it's a list and description of what follows you all the days of your life. Goodness. Mercy is a word, I best would pronounce it chesed, has sort of a dual meaning, kind of a covenant of grace. It's a covenant because under a covenant, each party has an expectation. In a covenant of grace, then we have the expectation of God that he will be our good shepherd. He says, I will be your good shepherd. Our part of the covenant that he expects from us is that we show up. That we show up and we allow him to uncover who we are. That we learn over our lifetime to shed the layers of what I think I should be, or what I think God's going to want to see, or what I think other people want from me, and just begin to show up me. And not waiting for everything to fall apart and then have no other option, but to learn to go to that place. That's our part of a covenant with God. Grace, the grace part of the covenant, is foundational. That's what we've been talking about, where my failure is what qualifies me. In contrast to the leading and guidance and grace of the Good Shepherd, it is my failure that qualifies me for the feast. It's my failure that makes the story that I can share with the people around me as I invite them to the feast, because my story highlights how unworthy I am. And yet, there I was, sitting at the table with God. Chesed, mercy, is a covenant of grace. It is a picture of unfailing love. I don't know why this came up to me this week, but I was remembering when faxes were a big deal. You know, when you get a fax, and 90% of the time it was someone trying to sell you something and it came through all grainy, or some like inappropriate joke that was meant for somebody else. I remember one fax we got. It was a police officer from Miami who was sending out this fax because he was charged by the president to make sure as many people in the country knew as quickly as possible that there was an epidemic of people putting HIV-infected hypodermic needles in gas pump handles. And he was trying to get the word out as fast as possible. That was his job, which of course means you would fax as many people as you could, right? No. Would faxing, maybe some of you are thinking, wait, I thought that was cool. That was really happening. Yeah, you wouldn't fax everyone in the country. If your job was to get the word out as quick as possible, would you sit there and send faxes to everybody? You know, oh no, this looks important. Here it comes. Oh my gosh, needles, gas pump. I got to get gas this afternoon. It's completely a scam to play on your fears to motivate you to action, right? To get you to be afraid of something that's every day. Or there was another one that came out, a variation where it was a needle in the coin slot on payphones. So immediately we invented cell phones, so we don't have to worry about that again. There's an urgent fax that plays on our fears to get us to do something, or to get us to understand, or to think a certain way. Thank goodness in that case it was a total hoax. I'm hoping that we get that right. That's not happening. There aren't needles in your gas pump. But you're all going to look later, aren't you? Next time. God is so much more creative than an urgent fax playing on our fears to get us to do something. God is desperately trying to demonstrate his unfailing love. I prepare a feast for you, the unworthy. I sit at the table with you. I am not shy about being associated with you in the presence of all the people who know how unworthy you are. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you more than I hate sin. My favorite prophet story is Hosea. And you can find the whole story in the book of Hosea. God calls his prophet Hosea, and he says, Hosea, I need you to deliver the most important message to my people. And Hosea is new to the prophet game, and he says, all right, sometimes being a prophet can be dangerous. If you've got bad news, they don't respond well to the middleman. But God gives him a job. He says, I want you to go and you're going to demonstrate my incredible love to my people. And this starts to sound really good until he lays out what this is going to look like. God says, Hosea, I need you to go out and I want you to marry a prostitute. Which probably would have been a little confusing on the onset, because he wants you to marry a prostitute. Okay, what do you mean? And God develops it further and he says, no, I don't want you to just marry a prostitute. I want you to love her. I want you to bring her in, marry her, make her your wife, bring her the honor and the respect and the standing of a wife, and I want you to love her. Don't just make it a positional thing. Don't just make it, it's not a billboard. I want you to love this woman, and I want you to marry her, and she's a prostitute. And before Hosea can even get his mind around that, God begins to describe how this is going to unfold and then how it did. He says, she's going to leave you because she's a prostitute. And you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to get her and you're going to have to bring her back again and love her. And then she's going to leave you again. And she's going to go back to being a prostitute. You will have provided her with everything she needs to be a loved and respected and honorable woman. And she's going to leave that and go back to being a prostitute. And she's going to do it over and over and over again. And every single time, Hosea, I want you to go back and bring her home and love her again. Is there anything unclear about what God's trying to communicate to his people in that? His people, who he sets apart, who he makes worthy, who he makes clean over and over and over again. Isn't that your story like it's mine? Man, I'm not even very creative sometimes. It's the same stuff over and over again that I keep going back to. God's message is a message of unfailing love. It says, I am Hosea, and I will bring you back in, and I will love you because I love you. Not because I have some sort of contract, not because I have no other choice, not because you're the best option out of all these horrible options. I love you. You are completely unworthy, and I serve you and love you and bring you in under my name. This is the shepherd that David speaks of. Not a God playing on our fears to try to motivate us. Goodness and mercy pursue me, follow me for all my days. My favorite translation is where it says they pursue me. The language here of goodness and mercy is interesting that David uses. It actually is a personification of these two words. Goodness and mercy are personified. So David writes this in such a way that it's not just like good things and merciful things happen to me, but that there are these two guys. There are these two ladies, mercy and goodness, and they are pursuing me all of the days of my life. They are chasing me down for my whole life. Not just that God has this stuff to offer you. If you only come to the table, you can have my goodness and mercy. Maybe if you do these things, take that job, not that job, marry her, not her, go there, not there, and I've got this goodness and mercy for you. That's not the way David puts this at all. Goodness, Tov, and Chesed are pursuing me every day of my life. God is pursuing us with his unfailing love. This is where Rick and I always like to say to each other, we are a seeker-sensitive church, which if you have my church background, that's a scary thought because seeker-sensitive was sort of a mantra in the attractional church, which said, let's spend as much money as we have to get as many people in the building, and then we'll tell them about Jesus. Forget about the relationships and all that stuff. We'll do that after once we get everyone together. But now we have this understanding of seeker-sensitive. Yeah, we're seeker-sensitive. We're sensitive to the fact that God is seeking us relentlessly. We're seeker-sensitive because we understand that goodness and mercy are pursuing us. They're seeking us out because that's how the shepherd is. God's chasing me. I read a story about a guy who got a kind of a bizarre job from the want ads in the newspaper. A zoo actually hired him because they were between gorillas. The one gorilla had been shipped off. They were waiting for the new one to show up. And so they hired this guy to actually pose as a gorilla. And they tell him, okay, this is super easy. You put on the suit, you sit in the corner. That's all you have to do. You just sit in the gorilla habitat. It's just going to be about a week, 10 days maybe, and you just sit there. And so, hey, money's money, right? And so he always wanted to be an actor. And he puts on this suit, and he goes into the gorilla habitat, and he just sits in the corner. And people are actually coming by and like looking at him, and they kind of look at him for a little bit and go on to the giraffes or whatever, the lion next door. And pretty soon a fly starts buzzing around and just sort of like flaps it out of the way. Man, there's these 3 people watching and they gasp, oh, he moved. And they start taking pictures and he realizes that every time he even just like scratches himself, they're just like going nuts. The crowd loves it. And so he thinks, well, shoot, man, this is great. And he kind of stands up and arches his back a little bit. Oh, they're shooting video. And there's a crowd starting to gather. And he finds some of the bananas in the corner. And he peels a banana and he eats it. And he does that trick where you break it in half with the other one. And everyone is going nuts over the gorilla. So, man, this guy, it starts to go to his head a little bit. So he sees the big tire swing. And he climbs up on the tire swing. He starts swinging back and forth. And the higher he goes, the more the crowd is screaming, the more the flashes are going off. And now he is just over the top and he cannot stop himself. And so he swings higher and higher and higher until the rope breaks. And he, sitting in the tire, flies over the fence and lands on the ground on the other side in the lion habitat. And he gets up and he's kind of shaking the stars away and he looks straight across the yard and there is the biggest lion he has ever seen, mane, teeth, and all. And so he sits real still thinking maybe the lion didn't notice. And the lion looks him right in the eye and starts stalking over to him. You know, that low little shoulder moving thing that they do. And it's starting to build speed as it runs to him. And finally he breaks character and says, forget it. Help me. Please help me. I'm just a guy in a gorilla suit. Somebody get me out of here, please. I'm just a guy. I'm not actually a gorilla. Somebody help me. The lion runs up to him, pounces on his chest, and is standing over him. And all of a sudden, the guy hears a voice that says, shut up, man. You're going to get us both fired. Never believe anything a preacher says. God, the shepherd, is chasing me down. But it's not what I think it is when I get chased. The God of the universe who knows that I am unworthy, who patiently sits through me and my whole life constructing this facade, patiently giving me every opportunity to peel those layers away, to be who I actually am, because that's what he loves. That's what he protects. That's what he guides me to, is that place of my soul and healing in my soul. And when I begin to understand and embrace what it means to have the good shepherd, my cup overflows. I begin to understand that it is his goodness and mercy as if they were people pursuing me every day of my life. Not happiness and pain-freeness, although there are some moments, aren't there? But goodness. Everything that is true and pure and excellent and right is chasing me down. I'm not desperately trying to accrue those things. God is chasing me with them. If I can slow down enough, if I can look enough to care of my soul, those things can catch me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. We'll probably be repeating this phrase from Dave Browning long after he's dead now. This story ends well. Not with a sense of denial, not with spinning things to try to make them sound better than they are, but a sincerity in our soul that we understand that whatever goes on here, the story ends well. The shepherd leads us. He's out in front. He walks beside us. And now we understand that he follows us. The shepherd all around us is a worthy shepherd indeed. Amen? Why don't you stand with me and I'll close this in prayer. Father, we don't deserve a good shepherd like you. And as soon as I think I understand that you still love me, even though I know you don't deserve me, I discover a deeper layer of not deserving you. I mean, I really don't deserve you. What a beautiful, cup overflowing realization that the deeper I go in who I am, and the more unworthy then that I feel, the more exposed and vulnerable I feel, the more intimately in love with me you are. Because that is what you were seeking to begin with. God, may we be the people who understand this. May we be the people who allow goodness and mercy to catch up with us because you lead us, you follow behind us, and you walk alongside us. Thank you for your unfailing love and your intimate faithfulness all the days of our lives. Amen. Thanks, everybody.